Welcome all who is here already. We wait like 1-2 minutes to let everybody enter the room, let's say, or enter the screen, and then we'll start this webinar of tonight. Okay, let's start this evening. Welcome to you all. We have a full house tonight, which is very nice to see, and I can imagine why, because it's a very important topic. First, practical, you can choose in which language you want to follow this lecture. It will be partly, most of the lecture will be in Ukrainian. You can choose Ukrainian channel at the globe on the bottom of your screen of the Zoom. You can also choose the English channel if you are English language, you want to follow it in English language. Like I said, it's a very important topic, and then so I'm very excited of tonight's lecture and what will happen. We have two speakers here, Oleksandr Anisimov and Yehor Vlasenko, who will present a study. It's conducted in Vinnytsia, the municipality, and it looks of how local authorities view their future land use. What factors do influence their decision making? Why their long-term role in land conservation often remains invisible. So it's really a look behind the scenes, and I think it's very important for other municipalities to look at it, but also for urbanists and planners who are working in those places and really have to look into it. It is one of the fundamentals. It's often called the dark matter, in the sense that it's not looked at in full sight so often, but underneath it's super important how all those rules and sometimes even games are being played. So tonight we'll hear a lot more about it. After the lecture we will have a reflection by Peter Lacoure. Very nice that you are here as well. Peter is from the University College in Ghent, and his research focuses also on no net land take, so an expert on the matter. Oleksandr is a doctor and researcher in spatial planning in Aalto University, and for a very long time already an expert on housing and land use in Ukraine from the Institute of Housing Policies, and head of the international symposium called Rebuilding a Place to Call Home. Yehor Vlasenko is a PhD student and doctoral assistant at the Federal Polytechnic School of Lausanne, and formerly head of a GIZ project, or advisor to the GIZ project of CANactions educational program. Let's start. Oleksandr, could you start sharing your screen and give your lecture? One more thing is that you can add your questions in the Q&A. You can also already start writing them. So don't use the chat for that, but please the Q&A. Oleksandr, go ahead.
Видно екран, так?
Can you see my screen?
Добре, всім дуже
Right.
дякую.
Thank you very much, Lilette, for this introduction and for this opportunity to share our research. Peter, thank you very much for joining. And our audience, sincere gratitude to you for finding time tonight. So the topic is rather new, and we would be happy to share our insights. So this lecture is based upon the article that we published together with Yehor Vlasenko and Maria Spinova, who was another co-author. And so you have an opportunity to download this article. It is in free access. And so it is going to be the carrot, which will keep you till the end of the lecture, we hope, because then you will have the link. So our article is titled Caught Up Between the War Localism and EU Land Policy Regulation. And we will start from the general things and we will come to the more specific details. Since 2019, 2020, the European Union has adopted a number of conceptual documents, and since then it has been developing the framework, which is titled the European Green Deal. This is not one strategy, this is not one document, this is a range of documents which promote circular economy, transition to green economy, zero carbon imprint, and other policies which are often voiced by Ursula von der Leyen, leaving no one behind, etc., which leads to the transition to circular economy. And so this is the framework within which European Union is effecting its policy. So this story, like Peter has mentioned in his articles, came well from an interesting dimension, and it is rather a curious way it reached us. Since long ago, there are a few institutions in the European Union which study the use of natural resources, tangible resources, land resources, and in 2009, 2012, they published the first reports which with the message that we need to limit our land intake. And these were the first signals which reached us from ecologists and economists who have no direct connection to spatial planning. Now the situation has changed radically. On the right, you can see a graph, a chart, and since 2018, it shows how since 2018 land use has changed in the European countries. The key donor of land in the European Union is agriculture. So agricultural lands which used to be utilized as pastures, agricultural lands, arable lands, and they were reshaped as urban territories, and they were transformed into urban industrial parks, infrastructure, etc. So the first two components I mentioned, arable lands, pastures, actually were lost, and these were huge areas natural areas that were lost, that were green fields to be transformed for development. So, and you can see it on the picture below. Actually, this is a picture from Turkey, which was used in the Green to Grey report. So here you can see how a lagoon is being developed with steel and concrete, and which is being transformed from wetland into a developed housing area. In parallel, there is also a reflection in the area of policy, and these documents do not mention spatial planning as such or urban space as such. One of the first strategical documents is the ground strategy of the EU, and it has introduced the term of no net land intake, and it means that the total amount of land covered by anthropogenic objects must stay the same. We must keep it as such, and we must strike the balance and stop the intake of any land for this purpose. The next one is the regeneration, the document that regulates regeneration of areas and which protects landscapes, and it says that each state must identify the systems, both land systems and wetlands and water systems, which must be restored by 2050. And so if we have limans in Ukraine, and we must restore them if we hope to join the European Union. And the third strategy is the strategy of biodiversity till 2030, and it envisages legal protection of 30% of EU lands, and so now it has reached 26%, and so it means that EU is working to include 4 more % of land to be protected. And altogether, this means that we as urban planners must take them into account and see what land we can use for development. So this article focuses on the interconnection, interrelation between state policies and local measures. The policies I have just outlined are adopted at the supranational level, at the level of the European Commission, and they provide the framework and the rules of the guidelines to move along. At the same time, these policies must be implemented by the local self-governing bodies. They can be called differently in various countries, but this is the local level. Our understanding how local self-governing bodies are implementing such policies and integrating them into their activities is rather limited. And so this gap between the goals adopted at the level of the European Union and the way they are implemented locally is actually this black box, as Lilet mentioned. So we don't know exactly how these policies are implemented at the local level, but we must find out. In Ukraine, I would like to provide an overview, and this perspective will be twofold. Ukraine used to be an agricultural country, and it was maybe the major agricultural player in the European Union. And we had a very high proportion of arable land. And so all the light green and yellow zones you see on the map are arable lands planted with sunflowers, with wheat, etc. So these are areas which are annually used as agricultural arable land. The challenges entailed by these territories include aridification, deforestation, land pollution. Not all of these challenges are our direct concern, but we are concerned with intense use of lands, which resulted in something in the situation which is to be dealt both politically and locally. So, like, we have municipalities with 90% of arable lands, and these municipalities in Ukraine are functioning as agricultural ones. In parallel, there is a map designed by Yehor, and it shows that since 2022, 18% of arable cultivated lands are currently under the Russian occupation. And so abstractly, this is just another map, but it is clear if we start analyzing it from the point of view of economy, we understand, it gives us the understanding that there must be some compensation to farmers, and there must be some compensation for the markets. It means that if we have lost 18% of cultivated lands, we need to find this land somewhere else so that we could compensate and get the same yield. And so it means pressure. It means pressure both on the available territories and for the territories which used to be not agricultural, like pastures, wetlands, and other areas which will have to be cultivated. So it means that our agricultural geography has changed, and it is going to affect the process of land intake. And so the final component of Ukrainian context, which we need to mention, is the protected areas. If you have a look at the chart showing the situation in 2022, you can see that Ukraine had the lowest amount, the smallest amount of protected land in comparison to other European countries. It is clear that this is not sufficient, and this again is a factor for local land use. If we understand that we need to increase the number of protected lands, then it will mean that we need to find these areas, substitute for these areas elsewhere. And so this is one more pressure on land use, as we call it in the article, because our country must maintain the balance, at the same time reach some rather high indicators quite soon. So we understand that not all of the EU countries have reached this 30% threshold, but it is going to stay and we will have to meet it. So the conclusions of our report. Actually, our research focuses on the local situation of governance in Ukraine and the factors that affect it, the factors that are provided by the supranational factors and by the supranational situation and national situation. And also, we are trying to look at the local level of policies and how people who represent governance what they do in this respect. So our research is based upon the triangle, which includes all these components, the perspectives of local self-government, and on the left you can see pressures on the land, and these could be renewable energy sources, agriculture, development, and also this chart indicates the factors, other factors which affect land use. So we tried to plunge into the Vinnytsia case And we conducted a survey for around 10 communities. And I think Yehor is going to give you the details of the methodology that we adopted and the conclusions of our research. So over to you, Yehor. Thank you very much, Oleksandr. Good evening, dear colleagues. So in my part, I will try to plunge into our research, into our methodology, and I will explain the methods we used to get the results which we got. So as Oleksandr said, we were using a range of methods. So it was the mix which included, which focused on Q methodology. And the essence of this methodology is that the respondents are presented with a number of statements which they need to either agree with or disagree with. And they are doing so according to a scale, and we adopted the scale of -4 + 4. And you can see the sorting on the screen on the left. So we have formulated 27 statements about the land use policy, and we used both references and expert interviews which we conducted to understand for ourselves that the statements we have formulated will be clear for our respondents and they will be relevant for them. The respondents were represented by 24 persons who are employed by municipal self-governing bodies, and most of them represent the departments of architecture, urban planning, and land use. So these are the experts who are engaged in land use policy making at the local level and its implementation. These state employees are working in municipalities of 10 territorial communities, and we focus only on the communities which amalgamated around the so-called regional centers. It was important for us because this research, as Oleksandr has already mentioned, focuses on the consequences of the subjectivity of policy making at the local level. So we needed to survey the municipalities which have enough capacity for that, and they have local self-governing bodies who are capable, who have expert capacity to do it. And out of the 10 urban territorial communities, Vinnytsia municipality was both a typical case and a non-typical case. It was rather close to the medium average values in terms of total area, in terms of the amalgamated territories in comparison with the area of the city itself. Vinnytsia, in terms of the population, is also very average. And at the same time, we all know that according to various estimates, Vinnytsia is a capable municipality and it is very active in policy making, in particular in land use policy. And so it enabled us to study Vinnytsia case by using in-depth interviews. There was a certain field trip part to it. There was also some study, theoretical studies, and we studied the strategical documents, we studied the projects that are designed in this community. And next slide shows you really. I'm not going to take much of your time because this is the visualization of the Vinnytsia community. So, and these are the statements which we prepared for our respondents in the 10 territorial communities. And the essence of these statements was that we used the Q methodology and the relevant software to visualize and formulate special coalitions of local actors around the statements. So we have selected certain statements with which everyone agrees. There is a consensus, there is a lack of consensus, or there is a situation when there were different opinions, different perspectives. So to make a comment on Vinnytsia municipality, we found out that the municipality capacity was substantiated, and also actually Vinnytsia is one of the few municipalities which was able to create the comprehensive plan for the territorial community and work with the land use policy. And so it was possible for Vinnytsia to present its clear land use policy. So here now on the screen you can see on your right, this is the project plan which is designed for the future, and on your left you can see the analysis which took a lot of time to make, and it is the author of this analysis, our colleague Maria Smirnova, and it shows the current situation in land use in Vinnytsia municipality, and we are trying to show the land use in this community. Practically, we use the aerial photo, and we use the coordination, the Korean data, Copernicus data for land use, and actually the data is collected at the level of European Union. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not a beneficiary of this methodology, but we don't have Korean data for Ukraine, but Maria did it by hand, and so she managed to use it on this map. And this map actually is a visualization not only of the current situation, but also it enabled us to translate the legend of the comprehensive plan to a similar classification to find the common language. And of course, there will be some margin, but it gives a more or less legible impression of what is happening and what can be used as data input for the future. So I would like also to show you a few things again, what we have discovered. So I think that for all communities, and especially for Vinnytsia, the new industrial parks and logistic hubs are the focus of development, and this is entered into relevant documents. And actually, the map shows that, but on the map on the left, we show the current situation, and we can see that if now we have a very clear visual differentiation between certain zones in the city, between the industrial locations, commercial locations, logistic locations, which, as you see, are dominating the left on the left-hand map, and the agricultural lands dominate the right-hand part of it. Then you see that the development means that integration of the zones, and we can see that the also all the amalgamated settlements which joined Vinnytsia, you see, also see industrial development, and this is changing the balance within the community. Another kind of measures which is common for both for Vinnytsia and other communities is suburbanization and housing development, both in the city and in the rest of the territorial community, in the amalgamated settlements and other settlements. So we have differentiated the types of housing here by the criterion of its density, and you can see the densely populated parts and densely populated urban areas. And if in the left-hand map you can see some settlements with rather low density, and you can mostly see them in the east, in the south. Practically they are dispersed in the east, and they are rather linear, like in other agricultural areas. On the right-hand plan, you can see the future-oriented densification of all territories, both urban and other territories. And so the land use presupposes densification in all the amalgamated settlements. So you can see suburbanization, which is quite intense. Other measures we have identified, we have analyzed not only the comprehensive plan, but also we did the interviews, and we used all sorts of sources. Another important topic which Vinnytsia municipality tackled is establishing cultural cooperation, which is a problem for many communities now. And for the city, it is in its turn important to ensure food security, to ensure that the crops which are needed in the city are grown locally. Of course, after 2022 and disrupted logistics, we can see that Vinnytsia learned its lessons, and municipality does everything to ensure food security. And finally, other measures which are important for this community are natural protection, focused on revitalization of small rivers and streams. Vinnytsia has adopted a concept for preservation of small rivers and streams. Initially, it covered only Vinnytsia as the city, but now it is upscaled to the whole community, and these rivers are being mapped, and the result of this is that these rivulets are present in city building documentation, and so their visibility is increased in the comprehensive plan, in the general plan, because of this project. So next slide, please. And to return to the research as such, we had materials that we got from the Q-analysis, which allowed us to single out the groups of stakeholders according to their response to the statements. And we had an opportunity to validate these findings. So we managed to apply our methodology. 24 respondents. We managed to split our respondents into 3 groups according to their perspectives to understand the kind of discourse which is maintained in these groups. So the first factor is titled pragmatic and cautious. I would say in many issues it is rather compromising. On the one hand, there is a big trust into the comprehensive plan. It also doesn't support the change of agricultural land use function, and so it is against this. And also this factor 1 is characterized by the general impression of these respondents that we must keep the land in communally owned as a reserve for the future. So they are very conservative. They do not favor quick solutions. The second factor is protective and densifying, and actually it had the contrary expectations towards comprehensive plan. They also support the idea of the compact town, compact city. They believe that sprawling must be prevented, city must be densified, and they need to build the brownfields within the city borders, and they need to consolidate communally owned plots and reject the possibility of selling them. And the third factor is titled growth-oriented. And for these respondents, the key focus is on logistic centers, industrial parks, development of manufacturing, and so they will support any measures conducive to that. And they are also sharing the attitude of factor 1, pragmatic group. They trust in the role of the comprehensive plan. And so the insights that we got, I would like once again to refer to the structure of our research methodology. And here I would like to say that we have used various methods to obtain and verify our findings. In general, the conclusion is that municipalities, local municipalities are in a difficult situation now because they are urged to formulate the rules for land use. At the same time, they show that they lack an understanding of their amalgamated areas and the factors of land use, the factors of pressures of land on land use, and as a result, they tend to very logically ignore the unknown factors or very global factors and the war produces a lot of such factors, and instead the municipalities are focusing on something that is manageable for them at their level. The second finding that we got, and I think that here we analyzed the consensus and the controversy between our factors. It was rather interesting to see that one of the consensus points, which was supported by all the respondents, is that they refuse the governing role of the regional policy in terms of land use. And it was really surprising to see it, to see such a consensus in all territorial communities, but now this is a finding. And number three, which we have already demonstrated when we differentiated the factors, there are deep differentiation in the perspective and hopes of the role of the comprehensive plan in land governance, and we believe that it concerns the difficulty of auditing the areas that are amalgamated and lack of capacity for many communities to do so. And we see that such attitude to the comprehensive plan, the different attitudes, can also root in not only pragmatic factors, but also in mentality, in-depth factors. So these are the findings we managed to formulate. And I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr also to make comments. Right, thank you very much. And I would like to show two slides to conclude, so that, and here, as you see, I provide both Ukrainian and English variants, so that our audience could appreciate the findings presented by Yehor. So, in case of Vinnytsia and in Ukraine in general, land take is not related only to urbanization. Yes, here we are also speaking about the renovation of energy sources in the Carpathians, for instance, but also we can see that agrarian sector is really aggressive, and it brings more risks, and actually it is one of the factors of deterioration for the land, and so the overall number of factors which we can see here are more diverse than expected, and we must pay more attention to the role of the rogue factors, which are very difficult to place. Factors like agriculture and energy sector, which are also responsible for land take and which require our attention. So another thing Yehor mentioned, and which we can see on the basis of these findings, we see new problems, new challenges, new factors, which are going to grow in the coming years, but we have not noticed enough understanding in the municipalities of these problems, challenges, and factors, and their activities are carried on within the old framework, the framework they understand, and so the new factors do not cause them to be attentive or to react. So, as researchers, we haven't managed to identify their understanding at the local level of what land use in the new situation is and how it is affected. So this conflict, I believe, is going to escalate, and land use policy at the national level will be rather a challenging thing to do if municipalities are going to implement it. So, and the consensus of the municipalities that we have surveyed with regard to the regional powers and their antagonism towards the opaque regional policy leads to the challenge of isolation of the municipalities within the borders of their own communities. And so this will lead to further isolation because this system doesn't allow for good governance of the areas and to the resolution of bigger issues such as migration, trans-border factors and processes, which are very difficult to resolve or sometimes impossible to resolve within one municipality. And we believe that the system which allows no respect for the regional level is not viable in terms of land use, in terms of reaching the very ambitious goals set by the European Union, in terms of nature preservation, zero net land intake. And so this situation must be changed, and without the mediatory regional level, our national land use policy will fail. So what we understand for the EU level, supranational level, we understand that the policy of zero net land intake, it could be seen as a very good positive policy. We understand that we must control suburbanization, we need to reduce the pressure on land, we need to reduce pollution, but when we describe it as a challenge for the local level, which relates to a very specific activity of very specific enterprises, of very specific rivers, of very specific residential patterns, we have chaotic development, and this kind of policy has very specific consequences. The deficit of land for specific purposes can really be growing. So it is good when we have land and we can refunction it and transform it, but if we have this land deficit and when we have so many constraints imposed by the EU, on the other hand, so the municipal level under these conflicting pressures can face a very flagrant deficit of land, and it means that the goals set by the European Union will be not possible, and actually they will be ignored by the municipalities in terms of land use, or we are going to find ourselves in the fulcrum of the very, very big conflict and huge deficit of resources, and the municipalities will not be ready for that, and the municipalities see no way to get prepared. And so our expectations are that we must raise awareness of the local stakeholders in terms of EU soil strategy, for them to understand it and for them to get prepared for the implementation, not through overcoming their resistance, but we must get them on our side. And so I guess these are all the findings we wanted to share with regard to the policy and with regard to Ukraine adopting its national strategy and the future of Ukraine in terms of EU goals. Thank you very much. Our sincere gratitude to our co-authors. And at the end of our presentation, you see the two QR codes, which will lead you to our open source article. And there you will have many more data, much information. So please scan the QR codes now. I hope that you will find it interesting. So I guess now we must remove our presentation and give the slot to Peter.
Thanks a lot. Really, really interesting and indeed important findings and important thinking. Let's indeed get to Peter. Oksana, are you going to share the slides? Does that work for you? Peter has a few slides prepared to show to us, and we'll reflect on the presentation in broader context, I would say, from other countries, and look at it from European, maybe not only European point of view. Does that work, Oksana, or should I go for it? I did not. I think I will do it. Sorry, it takes a sec. Does that work? You see it?
Yeah, just in full screen if you can, Bilet.
Yes, that should work. I'm not so savvy on this.
Yeah, there. Below.
It's hidden.
It's below, yeah. To the left.
Yes, here it is.
There it is.
And I have a very full and slow computer, but it's working.
Thank you
Go
very
ahead,
much.
Peter.
There we are.
There
we are. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful webinar and the interesting presentation that Oleksandr and Yehor showed us. It's a highly relevant topic also. And as said before by Lilette in the introduction, I'm a researcher lecturer in Belgium, especially focused my work on land consumption, the problem of land consumption, land take in Europe, not only for Belgium, because Belgium is in fact a bad example of land consumption. That's why I started first in this topic, but I got interested also in the broader perspective, as Lilith said, for the whole of European Union and the problems of land consumption. Last week, by coincidence, an interesting project was launched and published in 11 news media across Europe. It is called From Green to Grey, and I thought, while I was reading the paper by Oleksandr and Yehor, I thought, wow, this project done by Norwegian journalists very well fits this webinar. So I wanted to start with this. The web page is indicated on the slide, and there's also a YouTube video that goes with it, and it shows, well, painfully, I would say, the damage done to the European landscape, European nature. I'm not sure if Ukraine is also has been included by the researchers. It's a journalistic research, but nevertheless, it is an interesting new measurement that is done about land consumption across Europe with recent data based on satellite imagery and IA detection to actually try to get hold on what has changed over the years. And for instance, in Norway, that was quite, yes, Ukraine has been a part of the research. Fantastic. Thank you, Alexander. So even the Ukraine condition can be looked at in this project. Has been for some countries quite a shock. It was a shocking project that was published in Norway, and last weekend it was also published for my country in Belgium. And the interesting thing is that it likes, well, summarizes up the more largest parts that have been lost due to development. Some developments I can imagine are strategic, very important, needed, while other ones are just like this one, recreational, less important, but what we have lost was also important and is a trade-off in the planning from the planner's perspective. Has the trade-off been done here? Probably, question mark. Yeah. So the problem of land consumption, land degradation should really be in focus and the practice and the work of planners, because it is like a main topic that connects to all other topics, like the ones demonstrated in Oleksandr and Yehor's paper on agricultural policy, on climate policy, on preservation of natural areas, and so forth and so forth. Yes, next slide, please. So what I've done while I was reading carefully the paper of Oleksandr and Yehor's, I came up with a couple of reflections and also or propositions, you could say, about land policy in general, but also specific on the situation of Ukraine described in their paper, and mirrored to a non-Atlantic policy that, well, member states in Europe should at least try to achieve by 2050. So I will go through only 4 propositions that I want to put forward for further discussion also in the following question and answer part. Well, they are more general. They do not go into detail into the work of Oleksandr and Yehor, but because I'm not that familiar with the Ukraine situation, but there were some elements that I wanted to highlight that struck me when I was reading their work. First of all, of course, the situation that is specific of war in Ukraine sets additional pressure on land, additional challenges for the municipalities, topped upon the other ones that we should address in these times. And what I found also interesting in their paper is that it clearly demonstrates the need for strategic autonomy, that a hostile environment that we unfortunately live in Europe and from different sides of Europe, that a hostile environment requires strategic autonomy of your country. Could be European as a union, but also for member states by itself. And a strategic autonomy requires lands, and very much lands. And we planners tend to forget that also food production, water security, renewables need a lot of lands, and that we need to be sparse on land when we look at developments and development of urban sprawl and retail and industrial developments that are squandering land, as demonstrated in the European From Green to Grey project. And then the fact that there are also land claims coming from other sides that are of vital importance, like water, like food production, and so forth. And that we should really look into from at least a national or a regional perspective to a kind of a goal of land distribution, land use distribution. Oleksandr mentioned, for instance, the ecological strategy of the EU, saying that we should at least safeguard 30% of our land surface for other species, for natural development. And that, of course, would also help us in the combat against climate change. We need wetlands, we need forests also for that, not only for the conservation of all kinds of species. Well, 30% of conservation, securing land 30%. added to that 50, 60, I don't know, 70% maybe for food production, but it doesn't leave a lot of land, of course, for development. So if we have a look at the sides of other functions, non-developed functions, not constructed functions, we really need to take care of the land and be sparse in what and how we develop, not only on what locations, but also the impact, the amount of land that is sacrificed, that is withdrawn from agricultural practice and nature. A very interesting example, a bit further away in Europe, that I thought about when I was writing these propositions that I want to put forward for you for discussion, is Switzerland. Switzerland always had, for centuries already, this policy of strategic autonomy. And for this reason, also, a minimum area of land that needs to be safeguarded, secured, is enshrined in their constitutional law to make sure at all times that Switzerland could be autonomous in its production for food, water, energy, and so forth. Unfortunately, I think we are now living in a new time area that we should also take this into account, that we need to make our different nations more resilient and less dependent from other countries. And this costs a lot of land. Therefore, a sparse land policy is really needed. Then the second proposition that I wanted to put forward is the one on EU integration, because this is highlighted in Oleksandr and Yehor's paper also in different parts of it. If Ukraine would enter the European family of the Union, what would that imply of policies for especially environmental topics? Because, as you know, the European Union has not a planning competence. This is not accepted by the member states. They regard planning as a national competence, and Europe shouldn't interfere in that. But of course, nowadays we know that land has important environmental aspects to it that we need to safeguard and so forth. So, and that's of course a clever move done by the European Union. They enter planning from the environmental side, because environment is a policy competence of the European Union. So from that side, planning is influenced, is touched on. Recently, the soil monitoring law was approved, and the known Atlantic is an article in this soil monitoring law. But from, for instance, the Belgium perspective, Belgium was one of the founding fathers of the European Union. Well, we saw how the European Union grew to the currently 27 member states, and of course we hope the European family will continue to grow, but it also implies a governance problem. The governance system of the EU is not adequate enough anymore to address important challenges as environmental challenges. Some member states oppose to them, and then as a compromise, these goals are watered down. And the same happened with the central soil health law that Oleksandr addressed in his presentation. This was watered down to a soil monitoring law, not a soil health law anymore, but a soil monitor. We, as a member states, we will monitor how our land is evolving, and if it is degrading, well, we will monitor it and report it to the European Union. So we need more consensus about this integration and a common approach that makes things easier to govern and to reach our environmental goals. Yes, please, let the other slide then, please. Yes, please. So the second proposition is a top-down problem that is emerging, and we have to really collaborate across nations and agree on these important topics much faster, because in our differences lies also the weakness of the Union and the European family. that is, of course, a top-down approach. Then I also wanted to add a bottom-up approach, because this is very present in the paper of Oleksandr and Yehor, the local authority. If we do not agree European-wise or nation-wise on binding targets that trickle down to these municipalities, well, then they trickle down as non-binding targets. They are indicative targets. They are not compulsory. They are not binding targets. And this combines with a general evolution of planning systems in Europe, as observed in the Compass study, for instance, by ESPON. Well, combined with decentralization and more subsidiarity towards all these small local communities and local authorities, this becomes a huge problem of governance as well. We are facing global challenges, and if we rely mainly on mayors, planners on the local practice, that combination will fail of non-binding targets, a lack of support for local authorities, and a high decentralization. Then we won't achieve these very important targets as non-Atlantic. So the local authorities are really central here. Much is expected of them, and how can we reinforce them with limited planning capacity, limited knowledge also of huge global challenges. So a bit underlining also what Oleksandr concluded with, I think we need to strengthen or re-strengthen the role of regions or intermediate governmental authorities or nationwide to support local authorities, maybe diversifies competences. For instance, if strategic decisions are needed on a specific territory of a municipality, couldn't the region take over and be competent for it, instead of putting all competences for day-to-day building permits, but also strategic important aspects, all on the level of a local authority and a mayor. Couldn't we diversify this and also support, of course, these local municipalities? And to conclude, my fourth proposition is specifically on non-Atlantic. Why should we do this? Well, for a lot of purposes, of course. And in fact, it was in 2011 that European Union launched this important environmental target for the first time. And it was called For a Resource Efficient Europe. Well, nowadays, 2025, you could add for a resource efficient Europe, yes, certainly, but also for an autonomous and a strategic independent Europe. It is highly needed. And in that way, we need to address as planners not only developments and pressing needs coming from housing, economic development. Of course, we need to address these, and of course, we need to steer this. But this is only half of the whole problem. We also need to address spatial claims and needs coming from these strategic important aspects as food production, sustaining other species in all our countries, making space for wetlands, water, and flooding. All these aspects require land, and much more land than housing, economic development in surface. So the more we squander around, the more we consume land for the traditional needs, and the less we densify, well, the more it becomes difficult to arrange things and to reach these targets on other aspects like food security, like water, buffering, retention, climate change, and so forth. So for me, it is like a coin with two sides, non-Atlantic. We need, of course, to steer development, of course, and we need to do it in a proper way. But the other side of the coin are the invisible needs, as Oleksandr mentioned, other factors that also are also needed to be addressed. And if you quantify them, even take more land, than what we now are squandering for all different purposes, because, well, these other factors are not in our scope. So I wanted to conclude with that aspect on non-Atlantic. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, comments, critiques, I would be happy to answer them in the Q&A.
Thanks. So this all together is a really nice combination. Maybe Oleksandr or Yehor, you want to react to the reaction?
Maybe we are still inviting some attendees. I see we have a member of parliament here. We have colleagues who are working on international projects. I think everybody has something to say. Maybe we should also ask our audience that they join up the discussion. You can sort of, jump in, I think.
Yes, please. There are two ways of doing it. One is to raise your hand there's some hand raising tool underneath in the Zoom, or just put your question or remark in the Q&A, which is also in the bottom of the screen. And further, we can also bring you up to the screen, and you can be part of the discussion on the panel itself. There is already one remark or one question, but I don't know if you are knowing that situation, so I'm just putting it. I am wondering, says who asked the question, Alaina Mallet, if a model similar to the Adirondack Park in New York State could be successful in any of the oblasts in Ukraine. The founding legislation for the Adirondack Park created state-maintained parkland, while municipalities still maintain limited autonomy. Is this something that is familiar to you? Can you reflect on it, or is this something that first needs to be studied? Alaina did put a link to it to dig into it more, but maybe one of you know it. Peter, have you ever encountered that?
I think it's interesting. Maybe a very short, brief remark. I've been looking at some different models of property governance, and I think, of course, US is quite an extreme case in many ways, but also a very strong state. So, for as we know, United States as a state owns, not taking into account, for instance, China. But as a kind of a state in a formal state property, it's the biggest landowner in the world. Like, it has so much land in the west of the country that it is kind of 3 times the Europe size, right? So it is a very strong state owner, and they do not allow development in those areas most of the cases. So all taken into account, all of the complexities of the kind of suburbanization and extended diffuse urbanization of the United States, they also have a very particular way of understanding kind of property rights, especially on the state level, where if the signature for development comes from the basically state secretary. So the level of let's say decentralization is 0. So to allow for development in the state land, which is formally not state forest, but a kind of a state national lands, it is a state secretary's signature. So in a sense, that is a kind of the fastest pathway to no net land take, right? So it's very easy to kind of get there when you understand that, well, okay, the decisions are made on the higher level, and we don't take into interest any local mayor's constituency and whatsoever, because of course there are some municipalities that are around these lands, but they don't take them in account. So they are not part of the municipalities, which is a different structure of municipal property than in most European states, where municipalities cover all of the territory. So there are lands that are not covered by municipalities, so municipalities have no vote about what's going to happen there at all. But I think there might be some interesting story, because our kind of governance of land in Ukraine is still emerging. So I think European cases, or maybe US cases, have much longer history, and they have tried many more options that are available for land conservation. And I know US has a very prominent private nature expansion funds who are buying forests and just planting trees. So they are non-profit organizations that are expanding natural landscapes into areas which were not used, or which were fallow lands, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's possible also this way, but I'm not sure if this is the kind of direction that we are thinking about when we are talking about no-net land take. And the scales that we have, even though Ukraine is big, are still much smaller. Like it will require perhaps a much different infrastructure of decision making than they have in the United States, for instance. So, but I don't see people raising hands. Maybe one of the reflections on the Peter's last slide, I think it's really crucial, because I was also thinking about sort of paradigm shift about no-net land take, which comes conjoining with the issues of kind of planning with soils and planning with sort of environment as a main kind of tool or main kind of stakeholder. And I think we're very far from this understanding of different departments of decision making. So it's like, if you take a European Commission, there is this kind of directorate that does economic policy, and then there is directorate that does nature protection policy, and they can become very much in a conflict. And it's a similar thing here. Like, how do we think about projects that are related to housing development or to regenerative energy development, that are somehow still thinking through the issue that we are losing soils, or we are losing natural habitats, or we are losing other things, and then how do we evaluate, and how we do compare these things against each other. So this requires a much more intense debate that is happening now, because we still treat land as it will fit somewhere, right? It's often the discussion that we will still find some place. But I think the weighting of things and the discussion between different sectors has to become much more intense. And then it will be maybe much clearer to local authorities as well, a little bit, that they are very much under pressure to find solutions that are that are kind of, you have to pay this way or the other. It's not a win-win. There is a paper by Belgian and French and German and Dutch scientists that kind of 10 points on land policy, and one of the key points that there are very little win-wins in land policy. So it's very, very rare that you're really able to kind of get everything together, have the cake and eat it. It's always a question of the choice.
Anyone wants to react on it? We do have another question or remark from Natalia Lebedin, who is talking about multiple levels of government owned land in the US, with varied levels of management oversight, like federal, the national parks, for instance, state parks, and municipal metro parks. So it's not just one level, but they're really in different government management levels orientated. And there is a question in the Q&A. Thank you for your presentation. It's a question for everyone. It says, spatial development is inseparably linked with economic development. Ukraine is currently a developing economy. Unfortunately, we are only in the process of building our infrastructure because we want economy to grow. This means that, one way or another, we will need to expand our urban area. How to work with politicians to explain to them the importance of using and renovating existing urbanized areas, and not always the seizure of new natural areas. A very relevant and important question, I think. Not an easy one, but...
I think there are two directions, one conceptual and one practical. I think Peter also already mentioned that like we are at some place where we have to go either one direction or the other, and it will require us to kind of strategically rethink our priorities about land use, because in the words of Dieter Helm, a British economist, what is not sustainable cannot be sustained, right? It's a kind of a simple, self-evident remark, but if we are doing something that cannot be sustained, why are we expecting for it to work in the future? Like, how are we convincing ourselves that this is the thing that will work? So I believe that although Ukraine, in a similar, let's say, discourse model as India says, we will burn all the coal in the world because we are still developing, can say to European Union, we will build every road we want in this world because we are still developing. But I think this is a completely wrong modality, because one thing is that, of course, we have not detached our economic growth from virgin material consumption. And this is going to be a problem that the European Union is trying to tackle. But it is also the challenge that you can do everything in a much better way. You have, regarding especially land take, you have countries that do it very conservatively, like the Netherlands or Switzerland, and the others which do it like the way you want, like Poland or Norway, where you can develop every piece of land that is not national park. You can basically just come there, take the regulation from the municipal authority and start with a building permit. So there are different trajectories under, similar governance regimes that basically enable a very different approaches. Is Netherlands less developed than Poland? I wouldn't say so. But the land take in Poland is times more per person than in the Netherlands in the years. So it's a strategically different kind of thinking regarding what do we believe is a good, let's say, society, urban environment, and so on, which is very much linked to the ideology of what is the role of the state or what is the role of the, public regulation in our lives. Because, Netherlands didn't do it because they sort of knew about the land take problem back, 70 years ago, but they believe that, sort of municipal regional regulation will serve the public good. And this is what worked out also for no-net land take. It's much easier to design no-net land take policies in a country which has strong municipal and regional governance than in a country where the regulation is on the side of property owner. And on the practical side, where you asked how to work with politicians to explain them the importance of using and renovating existing urban areas, I think it's already happening. And I think this is one of the areas where we have a lot of space to work on. The issue is the costs, because of course we have, for instance, Kalush chemical plant. It's polluted, it's damaged, but it's an area which has been, for instance, used for years and decades, and it will be a positive land take. So it will be land creation, let's say, if you renovate this area and reuse it for, I don't know, IDP housing or some sort of natural reserve and park. Then there is a lot of options how to do it, and it's just standing there being unused, just a kind of a debris and fallow areas and a lot of scattered materials and buildings. So we definitely have it, but who will pay for it? And how do we create a system where paying for used land is less, taking into account depollution, taking into account debris removal and other things, than building on grassland or building on somebody's backyard with trees and grass and so on. So this is a challenge of economics in a sense, also kind of creating economic model and restrictions which enable this reuse of existing land or reuse of the land that has been already put into use. And this will be a challenge also for Ukrainian legislation in the future, so that we treat this land differently under different economic conditions, and not like you can just develop any land you want and it will not cost you anything, because there is always externalities in form of environmental damage.
Yehor?
Дякую. Я спробую.
Thank
Я
you very
бачу, що
much.
це наше єдине
I
питання, тому я
see
теж не
that this is a question that concerns all of us, and so I will try to respond in Ukrainian, and I will try to refer to the material which we have already presented today. In the first place, I think it is rather interesting that during this research. Our finding was some critique of the land use policy. We also started to criticize the overall goals in land use, and we see that this concept was not calculated or was not taken into account, that Europe could suddenly face such a shift in all sorts of land use modes, as you can see in practice. We also have felt that the role of agriculture, the role it plays in Ukraine and in certain countries in Europe, this role is different. And at minimum, if we do not focus on the war context, actually, in Ukraine, agriculture is a key source of export, and so the areas which are arable in Ukraine are sprawling to other regions due to the climate change and due to the war pressures, of course. And so for us, it is rather difficult to say univocally which land use will be more promising and which land use is better. The only thing we can say that today the responsibility for the solution, for the decisions we take, is vested to the local self-governing bodies, and they are not ready for that. And this is objective. There are many objective factors at play. What we can do here, I think we tried to illustrate it with the Vinnytsia case. We show when certain strategical trends in the development of the community due to the incomplete understanding of the area will result in the creation of industrial parks or housing, suburban housing development. And so it is, an okay kind of scenario for the development. But we believe that this proposal, taken strategically, is rather radical, and it will result in an inefficient land use in the future. But for Vinnytsia, we have seen that this small rivulets project is that shows that Vinnytsia explores its area and maps its resources. And then it is translated into the urban building documentation. So I believe that here we need to, there is a need to debate why one kind of land use can be better or worse than the other kind of land use, and also to encourage all sorts of processes focused on the research of their own territory, because we understand that the communities are doing this, but insufficiently, because a lot of bad decisions emerge from lack of information about their own territories.
Peter, anything to add on this subject?
Well, it's a very important question, because this problem raises, of course, in all different countries, and is the main topic of planning and steering that is raised here. The problem is, of course, at the side of the countryside and agricultural land and nature, the real value is not monetized, and we tend to monetize only in terms of development and development capacity, and not in what is lost ecologically or in terms of food production and the yield of food production. So that is the main problem in many trade-offs that are made in the planning practice, and politicians not take into account what has been lost. So that, of course, at the push side, we should convince or try to convince politicians that preserving agricultural land and nature is as equal, as even important aspect as the development side. And at the development side, of course, the pool side, you could say, we should attract densification and development towards densification. And I know that's a main challenge because, as said by Oleksandr, renovation and refurbishment and so forth is in many cases more expensive than a greenfield development. So how can we make greenfield, greyfield and brownfield development, case of polluted sites, more attractive than greenfield, excuse me. This is an important question. What is quite remarkable, especially for East European countries, I, for instance, investigated the situation of Latvia, is that even countries with a decrease of population have land consumption and have a very high land consumption. And that is because of this phenomenon. So it is much easier, less costly for green field development than grey field development, and therefore they are spreading out new developments, and their core cities, for instance Riga, the capital of Latvia, suffers from vacancy. Riga's nickname is the capital city of vacancy. That is awful. It is a beautiful UNESCO listed city with many vacant buildings because their planning system does not constrain development to the urban borders, do not hold tight urban borders, and let development spread across a much larger region. So even for countries with decreasing population, also these policies are important from the push side to make sure that their cities still can thrive and are lively with people supporting entrepreneurs, restaurants, hotels, and so forth. So also for that reason, we need tight constraints around urban settlements and be sparse in what we allow of greenfield development. It should be the last option, in fact. That was what I wanted to add, Lina.
Yeah, important one. We have one more question put in Ukrainian. Maybe Oksana, you can read it, and let's make that the last question because we are running out of time.
Right, so the question is like that. So it is interesting if we can impose constraints on the land market, which result from the European integration, which we mentioned today. So it means that Euro integration will speed up the land market and could result in abuse of land intake because people will try to take as much land as possible before Euro integration and before the European constraints are imposed. Do you agree with such prognosis? Because then we again need the moratorium on land use, but again, every time moratorium is imposed, this is stagnation of the market and it affects the market. Thank you very much for this question. It is very difficult to answer it in general. I think Yehor gave a very good characteristic of the challenges in his previous response. And this is a paradox. At the same time, we understand that we are living in a unique situation, but at the same time, we shouldn't make ourselves victims of the situation, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to develop our land in the arbitrary way. We must strike the balance. We must find the balance which will promote our strategic national interests and at the same time prevent us from abusing our nature. So the key indicator is very simple. The national legislation actually allowed for 10% of release use. Unfortunately, this is far from the real situation because our government our authorities, agricultural authorities, are very much affected by the agrarian business, and they are harming the land use very much. And they refer to, the need for currency, the need for foreign contracts, the need for establishing our role in the global south, etc. But in the long-term perspective, this means suicide, and we just, we must impose these constraints because we must survive as a society, and we cannot give out land in the way we were doing it before the invasion. We must put it on pause because privatization is going to be used for manipulation. Like veterans would like to get their own land plots. There will be quite a lot of former combatants who were who lost their housing and who are going to be the clients for the free privatization. And this will actually lead for total degradation of the remnants, I would say, of the planning system. And so we will have a lot of pressures from the agricultural sector, who is not interested to look further than 5 years. And so they are poisoning the land with phosphorus and nitrates, etc. And our population doesn't know that we don't have our resources, land resources, they are limited. So no one looks, let's say, has the perspective that, we don't have enough land. And then the social response would be, oh, you do not give land to the veterans, it means you do not respect the veterans. So no one understands we just have a horrible deficit for land. And so we must somehow change this mentality. We cannot afford finding ourselves in the crossfire in this situation when the state says, okay, maybe we can find some indicators, but we will be governed by the agricultural business requiring more and more and more land. So as civil society, we must have a systemic vision of this program, and I'm not sure that moratorium will be feasible. I think we are in a situation in which we cannot impose it now. So we need to find new instruments for regulating the land use. We need to regulate agricultural use of land, and we need to regulate the development of land as a sector.
Don't look at the Netherlands anymore, Oleksandr. It has been a fantastic example, but it's recently not anymore. Especially the agriculture sector is one of the bad examples of taking the land. Yehor, you wanted a final comment, so please go.
Thank you very much, Lilet. Actually, I would give my own perspective to the same question. I believe that the materials which are collected in our research are enough for us to give you a response. Really, we are talking about municipal decision makers in our research, and clearly, we don't have only municipal decision makers, we have other level decision makers, and each community, which is also is regulated by the national level, and also we have quite a lot of private sector, and they are spread all over the country, and they present their own market. And I think here we have reached the limits of our discussion. But at the same time, when we are talking about the municipal level here, and well, the challenge is the following. When we're talking about municipal governance, here we can predict that specific community is going to have this and that kind of land policy to at the same time pursue its own interests and plan for the future. So we understand that though it pursues its own interests in the bigger scale, it could harm the nation. So I believe that the key to resolve this challenge is not a moratorium, but coordination. And this coordination usually must be provided at a higher level. It could be higher than the municipal level. And here I would like to remind about one of the findings of our article about the consensus. All our respondents deny the regional level, reject the regional level, and it is a big, big problem. Let us be open. This is not natural that the municipalities see the regional level like that. Of course, they have their own reasons, and we should dig up the roots of these reasons. And maybe when we understand these roots, then maybe this coordination will be improved and there will be no need for the moratorium. At the same time, I can say that a lot depends on private landowners, because national level is something else.
Thank you. It's quite clear that that we are not finished, and that this research and discussion is not finished. It's something that needs a lot more thinking, discussion in the country. There's a lot of work being done at the moment on the urban code. Maybe Oleksandr, you could take the initiative and create the land code. I think it would be. And this is not a joke. I think it's super important indeed to really look at this larger picture for the whole country and think about with all those stakeholders together, because it's quite clear how everything is interacting with each other and how many stakeholders are there, and how it should be discussed with all of them to come to indeed a consensus. Yehor called it coordination. I think that is a good word to frame it. Thank you so much for putting this together. There was thank you also in the chat, and thank you for the audience for being here. And let's have a good evening to all of you. Let's continue the discussion. Follow our channels. This will be on our YouTube channel later, so you can also refer to it to others or hear part of it back yourself. Stay tuned. We will have another lecture in November. I think I don't even know the exact date by heart, but just follow us. You can subscribe to our newsletter and you get all the news about lectures, but also other programs that we have. Thank you again to the speakers. Thank you to Elena for all the translation, and see you next time.
Дякую. Бувайте.
Bye-bye.
Дякую.
Bye-bye.
Bye.